I'll begin by saying that I'm especially grateful to be here because my first year of college, in my first year seminar course, my professor, Bruce Hall, introduced me to James Baldwin. And that book, The Fire Next Time, and it opened my eyes to seeing the world in a way that I hadn't before. And it also put me on the path to becoming an educator so that I could do that for others too. And so thank you for having me and for doing what you do. My story begins in a place that's very different from here. You might have heard of it before. It's called Texas. That's thank you. That's where I was born and raised, although most people don't believe me when I say that. I don't know why my parents thought that would be a good place to raise four boys with dark skin and turbans and facial hair, but they did, and to their credit, our childhoods were great in so many ways. Very typical American in some senses, right? We played sports and played video games and hung out with our friends and neighbors, and in many ways, our lives were very atypical. And we knew that because the people around us would often remind us that they didn't think we were from there, or they didn't think that we belonged. And racism for my brothers and me was part of our daily experience. And learning to navigate that was part of our daily challenge. And I could share all sorts of stories with you about what that looked like. The one I wanted to raise today takes place when I'm in 4th grade. We're going for my older brother's 5th grade class party. It's at a roller skating rink across the baseball fields and soccer fields we used to play. And we walk in, my 3 brothers and me and our mom, and the manager runs over. And he says, "Get out of here with those damn rags on your head." And it wasn't the first time we'd heard something like that or been in this situation. But this time our mom was with us. So we said, you go handle it and let us know when you're ready for us. And so she goes to the counter, she's talking to the manager, we're waiting patiently at first, and then impatiently because our friends are skating and we want to be with them. And I go to my mom, and she has her back to me. I pull on the camise, like a tunic that she was wearing, and she turns around and she's crying. And I'd never seen her cry before, and my immediate reaction was to just start crying too. And she put her arm around me, and she said, "Why are you crying? What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, same as you. It's not fair. They should let us skate." And she said, "Oh, that's actually not why I'm crying. I'm crying because I feel so lucky." And I'm confused, right? I'm 10, but I know that there's nothing to feel lucky about. And I look at her and I said, what do you mean? And she said, "Well, I shared with the parents and the teachers and the students what's happening, and they all agreed to walk out together." And now I have the language for what I felt then, right? I would call it solidarity. But I can't describe to you what that feeling was as a 10-year-old when, for the first time in my life, I felt like the people around me had my back, that my friends were willing to give up something that they cared about because they cared about me more. And I promised myself that I would live into that in the future. And there's something else that I noticed in this moment and that I'd reflected on in the years since. And that is, in a situation where my mom should have felt powerless, right? Her kids were getting discriminated against, and there was nothing she could do about it. She could have given in and taken us home. She didn't do that. She could have fought back with the manager and argued with him. She didn't do that, right? The fight or flight options, which are so natural to us, she found a different way. And that was opening herself up to the people around her and inviting them to care. Now, she didn't tell them what to do. She just gave them the opportunity by sharing. And that made all the difference. It gave my classmates an opportunity to know what we went through. It gave me a chance to see how to deal with a situation like this. And on top of all of that, it gave all of us hope and optimism in a moment that was incredibly difficult, in a moment that otherwise would have felt profoundly dark. And that lesson I carried with me for the next several years through the challenges my brothers and I faced, being told by soccer referees we couldn't play, my older brother sitting out an entire year of high school basketball, his dream, because of his turban. The challenges were real, but so was that hope and optimism. It wasn't sugarcoating, it wasn't dismissing the challenges, but it was finding ways through. I want to share another moment where I encountered a similar challenge, although much more difficult. When I was 18 years old, my life changed suddenly, as many of yours did during this period, because I walked in senior year of high school and I heard there was a terrorist attack in New York City. I remember exactly where I was, just as many of you will remember. I ran to Miss Strong's room with my friends. We watched the Twin Towers go down. And after about half an hour, no one had said anything at this point, and then we heard from the anchor they had a suspect. And it was a name I'd never heard before, Osama bin Laden. And then they showed an image of him on the screen. And I saw his turban and his beard and his brown skin, and my heart sunk. I knew that while my friends wouldn't doubt me, I knew that most Americans wouldn't know any better, and they would see me as their enemy. And they did. I knew that my life would change forever, and it did. My mom picked us up early that day, my brothers and me. We went home, locked the doors, didn't say anything, and the death threat started that day. First by phone, soon people driving by. And it was a really tough period. I mean, the emotions and the difficulty, it was intense. And it lasted for days. And we felt twice attacked, right? On the one hand, as Americans, trying to understand what happened to our country. On the other hand, as Sikhs, as we're learning about the assaults and the abuse and the murders that were happening in our community. And one morning, my dad comes to me, and he says, "I'm so grateful." I look at him and I said, "What is there to be grateful for?" "Not this time." And he says, "Well, haven't you noticed? Haven't you noticed that our neighbors have been coming by to give us food? Haven't you noticed that your teachers and your classmates have been calling to check up on you? We're so lucky to have these people in our lives." And again, he wasn't thinking to my mom in the roller skating rink, he wasn't sugarcoating. He wasn't saying ignore the pain. He wasn't saying don't pay attention to what's real in front of you, but also make sure to notice the goodness all around you. The light that's always there, that especially in times of difficulty is just so hard to see. What he was saying in that moment, without actually saying it, was that we have a choice. In moments of darkness, when we feel under threat, our instinct is to focus on survival. That's how we're wired, and it's important. And we have to develop practices to be intentional so that when those dark moments come, as they come for all of us, that we can find the light that's all around us, the goodness that's always there, the optimism that will sustain us and nourish us. Part of what I've learned is that if we can ground our hope in something that's real, something that's substantive, then that can take us through anything, through the most difficult moments. And it doesn't have to be exactly the way that I face them. We all face our difficulties in our own ways. And the approach that I've learned through oneness and love and service, it offers a different way, one that's counter to the ways in which we deal with difficulty in our culture, one that doesn't divide us or turn us against one another, one that's not rooted in fear or hatred, but really offers us a way, truly, to break the cycle of hate, so that when people come after me and say, "I hate you, I don't see your humanity," I can see their humanity anyway. That's the promise of this way of living. I've shared with you a couple of examples of how I've learned this through other people's examples. I could share examples of some of the teachings and philosophies I've studied and how they ground me. What I want to leave you with is an example of a practice and how that's shaped my ability to deal with these moments. One of the practices I adopted after a really intense racist incident, where I found it hard to see the humanity in other people who were attacking me, was to really grow that ability by practicing every day, 10 seconds, to see the humanity in somebody I didn't know. It's easy to see it in your family. I started there. Easy to see it in your friends. I went there next. But soon it was about strangers, people I hadn't met yet. Nothing difficult, nothing super long, 10 seconds. Just see the humanity in somebody. About a month after starting this practice, I was running New York City, where I live now, training for the marathon, running up the West Side Highway, and I hear this guy yelling at me, "Osama, Osama." He also had a few descriptive, colorful adjectives that he added with Osama, right? Effing Osama, effing Osama. And I hear it, I've heard it so many times in my life. My fists still clench, my blood pressure still rises. And I hear it and I'm annoyed. And I keep running, and as I run by him, I look at him, and I see he's about 18, 19 years old. And I keep running, and in my head, I start to think, oh, he's just the same age as my students. And then I'm thinking, oh, he's like my students. And then I'm like, oh, this is one of my students. And so I stop, and I walk up to him, and it's uncomfortable for him, and it's uncomfortable for me. And he tries to dismiss me, right? He reaches out to shake my hand and say, I'm sorry. And my dad mode activates. And I'm like, no, we're gonna have a little conversation. and at first, it's incredibly awkward, right? And he's just trying to get out of the conversation. And it wasn't long, it was maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds. After a few sentences, I see the expression change in his face. I share with him, open myself up to him and just say, hey, it hurts. And this is why it hurts. This is how it hurts. And his expression changes. He hears me, he sees me, and he apologizes. Sincere, and I feel it. And we shake hands, and I run off. And I'm not saying that every moment or interaction with racism will end this way, right? This is my peak achievement ever, right? This is the storybook fairy tale ending. And I'm not even saying that I've changed the world with this interaction, right? Clearly I haven't. But just think about for a moment the shift in outcome just through this experience, just through this practice of seeing this kid's humanity. I see him and I'm able to just stop and connect with him. And instead of us both going on in our lives and feeling outraged and frustrated and angry, him feeling like he could do this to other people, me feeling upset that I didn't stand up for myself, we both walk away being better, feeling better. And I think that's the promise of this approach. That's the opportunity. And that, to me, is the difference where we can really build out empathy and connectedness in the way that our kids and students need today. Thank you.